All right, everybody, welcome to the Land Grant Podcast Network's post-game podcast for Ohio State's 35-16 victory over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. My name is Matt Timonini. I'm joined by Justin Golba. Justin, that game was something. There was a lot going on in that game, both positive and negative. The reactions to that game were both positive and negative, which is kind of how all things work with Ohio State fandom. But it was a win for Ohio State, a fairly comfortable win, at least when you look at the final score. It was a cover. And when you are the number one team in the country, undefeated, and you are trying to make it to a college football playoff, winning is all that really matters. So as Buckeye fans, I think there are a lot of things that you can look at and not be super excited about. And we will talk about those things. But the thing that matters the most is that they won. And I don't think anybody can be too upset about that.
No, I think the best way to word today was my dad texted me halfway through the third quarter, 2 words, weird one. It was just a weird one. It was a weird game, including the biggest play of the game, which was, oh, wow. Sorry, Texas A&M just lost. It was a weird game because, even like the play of the big pick six was just happenstance, right play, right time by Jordan Hancock. And, sometimes those balls bounce your way and sometimes they don't. Normally when you're the better team, they tend to bounce your way in the weird way. But, I wrote about it last week in the stock market report. We're in survive and advance. That's all it is. It's November. You win games and you move on. Somebody tweeted, I forget who, it was one of the beat writers tweeted, like, during the game, even though Ohio State's the number one team in the country, like, they don't feel like the number one. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. If you win, you go 15-0, you still win national championship, right? If they win out, they still go to the college football playoff. Honestly, even if they don't win out, they'll probably still have a very good chance to go to the college football playoff, as some people might know. But you just win these games, you move on. As you said, great teams cover. I think it was 18.5, right? And they won by 19. So
yeah, 18.5 was the final line that I saw. Yeah, kind of crazy.
I love that. So, at the end of the day, they got Marvin Harrison his 2 touchdowns for the Heisman. So, all the little things I think they kind of did. Obviously, it wasn't the prettiest game, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. But at the end of the day, it's a 35-16 win, and this defense is yet to give up 17 points in a game. So,
yeah, the offense was probably the worst we've seen it in terms of like efficiency and functionality in one of the games against competent opponents. Like, whatever you think of Rutgers, and obviously we understand that their history has not been as a good football program, but they were receiving votes, like multiple votes at the AP poll last week. So technically they were like the number 33 team in the country. And obviously that's not the same thing as playing a top 10 team, but like, this is a very good football team. So this is a win against a team that they should be very happy about. On the day, Kyle McCord was 19 of 26 for 189 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. The 65-yard reception by Trevion Henderson obviously helps that a lot. I said it in Slack, and I'll have to go back and look after the game when PFF puts out some of its more advanced stats and see what his average yards through the air per completion were, because I would be shocked if it's over 6 yards. But that doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if you get the ball out and guys do something with it. And obviously Trevion Henderson had a phenomenal game. He had a total of 208 yards. He had 22 carries for 128 yards on the ground and a touchdown. He had 5 receptions for 80 yards. Obviously that 65-yarder really swung the game. And even though he didn't score on it, it was one of the best receptions I can remember seeing by a running back in Ohio State history. Obviously we always love to see wheel routes, and I think there's one by Mosi that will always stick in my mind, but like, that was a really incredible run. You mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. had 2 touchdowns. He only had 4 receptions for 25 yards, but 2 of them were for scores. He was targeted 8 times, though. There were some that I thought he should have caught, but there were also some that were just really, really poorly thrown balls. But you have to be at least pleased with the fact that Ohio State was able to put up 35 points. Obviously, one of those was on a pick 6, which we will talk about momentarily. But that's a win that you can be happy about, Justin. We'll get into the specifics, but just in terms of like vibes, what was your thoughts on the offense? I know you are a much bigger defender of Kyle McCord than a lot of other people are on the beat, in the fandom, and on this specific podcast.
Yeah, I think in general, if you want him on the field still, you're a defender of him, I'm also, I do think it's partly not that I think he's like some great quarterback. I think he's fine. I'm not sold that there's somebody behind him that's great. I've seen Devin Brown. I didn't love it. Lincoln Kienholz is a freshman known for his athletic ability. I never really heard anything about his throwing ability. So, I mean, and granted, that's still good. Craig Krenzel didn't throw the ball much and they won a championship. So, I think that's why people want Kienholz, because I think he kind of reminds them of Krenzel because he's tough, he's athletic, and I think that's what this whole team kind of does a little bit.
Yeah, but Kienholz is like a legit athlete, like windmill dunking athlete on the basketball court.
Krenzel's just tough.
Okay. Yeah, let's get into we might as well get into the Kyle McCord of it all. Coming into this game, we knew that he was dealing with an ankle injury. He originally sustained it in the Notre Dame game. It was exacerbated against Wisconsin last week. He had been heavily taped for really every week since Notre Dame. I thought at one point last week against Wisconsin that they were going to put Tristan Gebbia in. They talked about him warming up furiously on the sideline. That didn't end up happening. Devin Brown was technically available today, but he has been dealing with that injury that we saw him get trying to go in against Penn State on a goal line set. So we don't really know how ready he was. The thing with Kienholz, though, is even though I would like to see him maybe not, at halftime of this game or starting a game, but I just want to see like what he's all about. The problem with him is that he just got to Columbus in June. So it might be a slightly different conversation if he was an early enrollee and joined the team in January. He did not. So he is 6 months behind on learning the playbook from when he could have been. And he wanted to play high school basketball. I have no problem with that. If anybody wants to finish their basketball seasons and baseball seasons.
I think his main, wasn't he like an all-state baseball player?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, he played both. Yeah. So I have no problem with that. But if you're going to ask a true freshman to play at Ohio State in the stretch run of a season trying to get to a college football playoff, that's really tough. That doesn't mean that I'm opposed to it, because I think you have to do whatever you can to get this team to some sort of offensive, efficiency and functionality that I don't think they're at this point.
Right.
But I don't know that there's a better option. And that's on the coaches. This is probably something where if you go back and look, I think I actually wrote this article, and I might have to go back and recirculate it. Like, getting Quinn Ewers was a really, really weird situation. Not when they initially got him, but when he decided to reclassify. And that really put them behind an 8-ball in terms of quarterback recruiting. And I don't know what's going to happen after the season. There are still 3 to 5 games left to go in the 2023-2024 season. So we'll deal with that then. But I just don't know that there's a guy on your offense that is going to come in and do any better than Kyle McCord. But I also am not opposed to finding out.
Yeah. The reason I didn't want him replaced at the half was what we've talked about on this podcast. He has been substantially better in the second half than the first half. Now, that is a problem in and of itself, that the production is not going from game to game. That's a problem. But we've talked about it a couple times. Notre Dame game, Wisconsin game, the Penn State game, I didn't get to watch too much, but because I wasn't available. But from what it looked like, a little bit at least, he is playing much better in the second half. This was a weird game just because of the way Rutgers was playing. They just didn't want Ohio State to touch the ball. So they were, it was a quick game. They were so it wasn't as many possessions as normal, but that was why I just didn't want to replace it at the half, because I was like, he's shown a pattern that in the second half he will be better. And I guess statistically he was. He threw 2 touchdowns and threw for 120 yards in the second half while he only had 80 in the first. So obviously most of those on one play. But that's where I think just with McCord, we have to see. And look, this is the 9th game of the season. You know what you have at this point with Kyle McCord. I guess you've seen it. The question just becomes, can now, they get Michigan State, then they play Minnesota. Okay. So you have those 2 teams that are not good. So you need to show some type of the slow starts can't happen. They can happen against Rutgers. They can happen against Wisconsin. You'll end up beating those teams. Michigan, different story. You play Georgia, you play Florida State, whoever the hell you're going to see later, different story. So that's where these first halves have just got to be better. Now, granted, the defense never gives up more than 14 points. Maybe you don't have to be better, but I can assume that against Michigan, it's not the defense's fault really if you give up 20 to 21 points. That's a hell of an offense. So you just it's strange too. I don't get it. I really don't. I've never really seen a quarterback that throughout the game progresses as he does, but doesn't progress. It's like we're starting on step one every game, and then we progress from there. It doesn't look like he really progresses game to game, and it's interesting to me.
Yeah, I imagine that a lot of that has to do, not a lot of it, but at least part of it has to do with the play calling of these things and how they kind of want to work in some balance into the game. They want to get him some things early on, and I don't know that that necessarily works with him. It feels like he has to be able to kind of go quickly, and they're often like, let's do something short, let's do this really easy thing. And we both talked about, like, let's run the Dwayne Haskins offense, and we still don't see that super often. But he seems to be a guy that once he gets some momentum, he tends to do better. And that doesn't seem to happen in the first half of games, which is disappointing because in the second half, he does look much better. I don't think that erases the issues that he has in the first half, because games are 60 minutes for a reason. And like you said, if you're going to play the better teams in the country, you have to be good for 60 minutes. And he's not shown that he is capable of doing that yet against anybody, against Western Kentucky, against Youngstown State, and certainly not against the better teams on the schedule. But there is something there. I don't think it's enough to make me be like, yes, he is Ohio State starter until he decides to leave. That's certainly not going to happen. I'm not saying that he needs to be replaced, but I think that Ryan Day needs to certainly look at his other options during practice. We don't see practice, so these guys could be terrible for all we know. We've seen Devin Brown in a game a little bit, but other than that, and Tristan Gebbia played some at Oregon State, including some starts with a victory over Oregon. But, you've got to figure something out with that quarterback position, whether it is with Kyle or not, because what he is doing in the first half of games is not losing you games now, but against better competition, and specifically Michigan the Saturday after Thanksgiving, very well could. Yeah, on the road especially. Now, I do want to say, like, we talked about TreVeyon Henderson's numbers, really incredible the last 2 weeks, over 200 yards all purpose. His running was just under 6 yards a carry at 5.8 yards per carry. And a lot of that was because of some pretty impressive cutbacks and some pretty, deft avoidance of tackles. But I will say, like, the offensive line is not great. They are not nearly as good as they even were last year, which still had some issues in and of itself. But, like, am I wrong that the offensive line looked fairly good in run blocking today? Again, not great, but there were times when you saw, on the touchdown run, they highlighted it on the broadcast, like Joshua Simmons of all people, like, really just drove a guy for like 7 yards and cleared a path for Trey. And I've said since before the season started that offensive line is clearly the biggest issue on this Ohio State team. They've been fairly decent in pass protection throughout the year, and run blocking was kind of their bugaboo. But it seems to me that the last 2 weeks, and it is certainly helped by a healthy TreVeyon Henderson being the one to tote the ball, but it feels like the offensive line is taking strides forward to where they can at least be competent and serviceable against elite defensive lines that will come later in the season.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it's the offensive line is getting better and better, but I also think just having TreVeyon Henderson healthy to where he can really hit those holes. He's so explosive. His burst is better than I've seen in a while. Like, I just think that that's just helpful when you have a guy that can hit. Sometimes he looks a little too much for the home run ball. He still has that issue and loses a couple yards. But other than that, I've been saying it since week one. I think TreVeyon Henderson is the X factor in this team. Marvin Harrison is the best player, but I think a healthy TreVeyon Henderson just changes everything. And you've seen it the past 2 weeks. If he's not healthy in these 2 weeks, I don't know how these games go against Wisconsin or tonight, again, where Harrison had 25 yards receiving. He had 2 touchdowns, but he had 25 yards. And, the wide receiver core, and this is a little bit to also the McCord argument, the wide receivers aren't great this year. They're just not. I mean, Harrison is obviously Harrison. He's on his own. But Ibuka's been hurt. Fleming's been inconsistent. Stover just didn't play today. He's hurt, I guess. Every time G. Scott makes a great play, he follows it up with a bad one. So it's just kind of like –
or 3.
Yeah. So it's just, having that running back, especially with Mayan Williams out for the year now, that like TreVeyon Henderson And I think it's what people see in Dallin Hayden as well. I just think Henderson's a little better, maybe a little bit more experienced. But, I think Henderson is truly like when he's healthy, he's a late first round, early second round pick. And maybe only that late because of running backs aren't that well.
Yeah, running backs don't get drafted.
Yeah. Like, I think he's as good as maybe outside of Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State, if you haven't looked up, is doing some unreal stuff. Other than that, I don't know if I can name a better back in the country when he's healthy.
I mean, I think Audric Estime is pretty good. I think Braylon Allen is pretty good, even though we saw him last week not do a ton against Ohio State. But I think you're right. Like, he's just dynamic. And I think the fact, this is a different conversation than maybe a post-game show, but what makes him probably interesting to NFL scouts is his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. He is tremendous, or tremendous, if you want, in that respect. And I think Ohio State is finally starting to figure that out, that is a weapon that they can exploit, especially when what we saw, and one of the reasons why I don't think that the passing game was nearly as explosive today as we've seen throughout this season, and which has not been nearly as explosive as it was last year, was that Rutgers, for the last 2 seasons, has done everything it can to keep everybody in front of them. If people forget that last year, Marvin Harrison Jr. was only 3 for 18. He had 3 receptions for 18 yards. Again, one of them was a touchdown last year as well. But Greg Schiano knows how to stop elite passing games. And in situations like that, and we're going to see defenses want to stop want to stop Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, and presumably when Cade Stover is healthy again. So on pass plays, having Trey out of the backfield is a really good safety valve. And I thought that we saw that today. There were some pretty interesting concepts that I thought we saw from both the running game and the running back passing game. But it was all pretty basic. Like, there were some interesting things here. There were some counters. There was some inside trap kind of stuff going on. But for the most part, we didn't see wheel routes. We didn't see a ton of fakes going on. It was just pretty much Trey being better than the Rutgers defense. And if he's healthy and able to do that against a pretty decent defense, like, that's encouraging for Michigan, which will clearly be the best defense that Ohio State faces all year, including in the playoffs, probably.
Yeah, and it's funny too. I think when you can tell he's healthy, not just by the way he runs, but the way they're running him. I mean, this whole Chip Trayanum had 2 carries today. It was TreVeyon Henderson's backfield to have. And granted, that is impacted by they want to redshirt Dallin Hayden and Mayan Williams is hurt. But they're not really using 2 backs anymore to where they're using 2 or 3 to start the season. It's just TreVeyon Henderson, and they're just working him as they should. I mean, he has, as you said, the past 2 games, he has 400 yards of all purpose. So it's not bad. So definitely it's cool to see. It's still every single time he gets hit, I'm like, hey, get up, please. But other than that, I'm at that point. It's weird. It's a weird way to watch football, but I think he's just so dynamic, and it's just you just when you look at any good team ever, basically they're a 2-tier offense. So you have passing game and a running game. Early season, we just didn't have the running game that we have now. All right, and it's very refreshing.
You mentioned kind of holding your breath anytime Trey goes down, and we saw a number of injuries coming into this game. You mentioned Mayan Williams is out for the season. Denzel Burke, despite presumably practicing all week, was not available this week. I have to assume that's a load management, keep him rested kind of thing against a team like Rutgers, who you were expecting to run the ball a lot, and they did, which we will get to. So maybe don't put your number 1 corner out there to potentially get hurt if you don't have to. Obviously, Lathan Ransom is out, and from what the word is coming out of the Woody, it's not the worst case scenario. So they're hoping to have him back for Minnesota and then presumably Michigan as well. But we saw some injuries in this game, which are fairly concerning. Even they're late in the game. Tommy Eichenberg had to go back to the locker room. He seemed to be really woozy after the 3rd down play on the goal line that ended up leading to a 4th down stop and a turnover on downs. So I'm not sure if that was just kind of got his bell rung and they took him to the back to kind of check on him. But then they also said on the broadcast that he was holding his arm. So maybe there was a little bit of both in those situations. We saw Josh Proctor on that, but ended up being a pick 6, get hurt. They took his helmet away. I'm guessing that was a concussion protocol type of thing as well, because he looked to be fine on the sidelines throughout the rest of the game, talking with teammates, cheering, being involved in the defensive huddles and all of that stuff. So those things are fairly important when you start to throw that in to the mix as well, because everybody's hurt late in the season, everybody has injuries, but you would certainly like to have as many of your starters healthy as possible heading into the rivalry game at the end of this month.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Tommy Eichenberg, I think he might have to be dead to not play. I mean, that dude is just I love the when they put out, I think it was the promo video for the Wisconsin game where he's talking about just like killing people, and you're like, okay, so he's in. Hopefully he's okay. That kind of implies like maybe a stinger to me, if kind of like he's a little woozy and he has arm hit, maybe just hit the ground weird. With Josh Proctor, he had a phenomenal game. I mean, really a game changer all game. He sniffed out a run that would have been maybe like 15 yards on third down and made it a loss of yards. And then obviously, reading what was happening with Gavin Wimsatt in that, because he looked like he was going to run, then he kind of pulled it back into a little fake jump pass on that pick six. So he had a great game, and hopefully, the Denzel Burke thing doesn't bother me. They're not a vertical threat. So you just don't put them out there to not hurt. I don't think everyone was talking about, like, I was a little surprised people kept calling it a mysterious injury. It's not a mysterious injury. He's hurt. He got hurt against Penn State, or he missed Penn State because he was hurt. He fought through it against Wisconsin, but I don't think he was fully healthy. I don't think he was 100%. I think he's good enough to look 100%, but that doesn't mean he was. And then, so you sit him on this one and get him ready for Michigan. You're not going to play another good passing offense until Michigan. Michigan State doesn't know how to get the ball down the field, neither does Minnesota, even though they should. So, I'm okay with that. There was only one really play in the game that looked like it might affect them, and that was the deep pass to Dremel, which was affected by the pressure, which was nice. So, but Gavin Wimsatt, I was really interested to see how they defended him, because they haven't faced anybody like him. He's not a great passer. He's a capable passer, but he's just he's just a dynamic runner. Plus, obviously, what they can do in the backfield. So I was interested to see how they did, and there were times it was great. I think there was a lot of gas out there. I think they were just really tired. I worded that incredibly weird, but
I know they were out of gas. Not a lot of flatulence. Well, let's take a real quick break. Maybe that too. Let's take a real quick break, and then we'll dive into the defense. If you're watching this live on social media or on YouTube, there's not really going to be a break. But if you're listening to us on the podcast after the fact, we will be back here in just a few minutes. All right, welcome back. If you went away at all. But yeah, let's talk about Gavin Wimsatt. He was only 10 for 25 passing for 129 yards, had one touchdown, and then that pick six interception. Kyle Monangai, I practiced this name last night for the other podcast that I did on Saturday morning, and I still screwed it up. But Kyle Monangai had 24 carries for 159 yards, including a 45-yard long, a 6.6 rushing yard average. That is, nearly a full yard more than Trey had. So that kind of puts his day in perspective. Wimsatt did rush the ball 13 times for a total of 49 yards. He was only sacked once for 7 yards. So he had 56 yards rushing, sack adjusted. But just really didn't have a whole lot going on in the passing game. They were able to use that at times, though, to move the chains. They were able to use that at times to kind of keep Ohio State a little bit off balance, but they never really did a whole lot in the passing game. They did have one 35-yard pass to Dremel, like you mentioned, but other than that, nothing really clicked all that much. They gave up, Ohio State's defense gave up 16 points. Some of that field position was thanks to good special teams by Rutgers and bad special teams by Ohio State. That trick fumble Ruski play. So, if you look at this and you're like, yeah, we'll get to that. But, they gave up 16 yards to Rutgers, and I think most modern coaches probably would not have taken the field goals as easily early on as Greg Schiano did. He's so old school, he thought, just get the points. Against a team that you are clearly overmatched with in terms of talent, you can't just keep doing that. But Ohio State gave up 16 points, and at least a couple of those scores were thanks to really good field position that they kind of either got by fluke or by something crazy. So, it's more than their season average. Obviously, Ohio State was only giving up 10 points per game coming in, but I think this is still a good game from the defense, even though they gave up a ton of yards on the ground. Rutgers actually outgained Ohio State 361 yards to 328. But like Rutgers is decent. So like I don't know how to feel about this defensive effort. Only gave up 16 points, but gave up and only gave up 361 yards, which isn't that, it's not a lot. So help me here, Justin. Like, what should I feel about this defensive performance from the Buckeyes?
Bend don't break. That's what it's been all year. It still was kind of that.
See, but hold on. I don't think that's true though. Like it might have been at the beginning of the season.
16 points.
Well, but what I mean is like early in the season there was a little bit of a bend don't break thing, but then they stopped giving up third downs, and then it was just like don't do anything. Like they didn't bend or break. So like I think that there's a good chunk of the season where that wasn't true. Maybe it was true today. Let me see what their third down numbers look like. Yeah, Rutgers was only 4 for 13. So it's not like they were kept bending and bending and bending. I mean, you could probably go and look and say that they just didn't get into a lot of third downs, especially as they were moving the ball. But like, I know what you're saying, but like, that didn't seem like the thing to me. It just felt like there were times when, whether it was gassed, because you mentioned that earlier, time of possession, Rutgers had the ball 35 and a half minutes to Ohio State's 24 and a half. Yeah. And so like, is it just that like the defense was, to use your term, gassed? Were they just tired and maybe needed a little bit of a blow? Ohio State is not shy about rotating guys, but with so many injuries, especially in the secondary, maybe that factored into it.
Yeah, I do think also there were a couple positions that they weren't put in good position. The fake punt, you give them the ball at the 25, that's not ideal. The McCord interception, they had just left the field after being on the field for 8.5 minutes. They just left the field. Now they got to go back out there. They still hold them to a field goal, but there was that. The fumble Ruski, I mean, that was just kind of a really smart play by Schiano. They had a good drive up until then. That was a 3rd and 1 on the 50 or on the Rutgers 40 that went for 50 yards. Just honestly, because it was a really good play call. I don't think anybody really has seen that since they were like 12. So I mean, so that's just the tip of the cap. So I think it was just a combination of, having a short field for Rutgers to I mean, if you get the ball in the 25, you're already in field goal range. So for the defense, if you hold them to field goal, you can't really do much more than that. So I think it was just a combination of that plus, a couple weird plays that they got the ball down the field on. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think they did enough. They only gave up 16 points. They scored 7. So by that logic, I guess they were only counted for 9. So I think they had a very, very good game. I think also, I mean, you look at the secondary, while Rutgers isn't a huge vertical threat, you're still missing 2 starting secondary pieces. So that was pretty key for them to step up and still allow, Wimsatt to really not, I mean, Rutgers had virtually no passing game with 2 of your starting corners out or 2 of your starting secondary members out, plus Denzel Burke, who is, one of the best in the country. So I like the performance from the defense. Rutgers is going to get some yards on you in the running game. They're good enough. They're powerful enough. This isn't like the Rutgers teams of past. I know the broadcast kept mentioning it, but like Michigan beat them 31-7. That's not blowing the brakes off either. And that was a couple of late touchdowns. So this is a decent Rutgers team that they're going to run the ball on you. They're going to get some yards. And I think that, I tweeted during the game, the reason field goals don't win you games is at one point Ohio State had 3 scores and Rutgers had 3 scores, and it was 21-9 because Ohio State had 3 touchdowns and Rutgers had 3 field goals. I was surprised Schiano kept taking the field goal. I wasn't surprised at first, maybe the second one, but the third one I was like, all right, you're not going to win this game 9-7. You have to start putting the ball in the end zone. And some people do it like that. Some people do it like Kansas State just did it, and it didn't work for Kansas State. So it all depends.
K-State blowing that one, man. How do you screw that one up? They were on like the 2, down 3, and couldn't score and then missed the field goal. Man, that's brutal.
Well, did you see overtime?
No, I didn't have a second game on, so I was just kind of following on Twitter. What happened there?
What I meant on overtime, so Texas got the ball first, got a field goal. So Texas is up 3. K-State got the ball to the 5-yard line, 1st and goal, incomplete. 4th and goal, they went for it instead of taking the field goal to go double
Oh,
overtime, and they didn't get it. So they lost the game. So, but a lot of fans would say that's the way to do it. You're down.
nah.
You're on the road. I disagree with that because you're Kansas State. You're playing for a conference championship. If you're Rutgers, where you don't really have a chance at that, do it. If you're playing for something, I don't agree with it. But
yeah, I mean, they're a ranked team. Kansas State was a ranked team. Were they number 22 coming into this weekend? If they would have won that game, that would have put them in a position to be in line for. And I don't know the Big 12 standings, but I would have to imagine they would certainly control their own destiny to get one of those two. Yeah, like that's rough. That's a rough one there. Real quick, let's talk about the fumble Rooski there, because it's not technically a fumble Rooski, because a fumble Rooski.
They kept calling it that. I was like, that's not what that is.
It's not, because in a fumble Rooski, the ball actually goes on the ground and someone picks it up. Yeah, it's a fumble. I don't believe that's legal anymore, because offense can't advance a fumble. And I'm not a rules expert, so if I'm getting these rules wrong, please forgive me. But it's the same idea as the fumble Rooski. But like, there were people in our mentions being like, you've got to be prepared for that. This player completely, like, yes, Greg Schiano loves trick plays, so you've got to understand that anything is possible. But like, that was just a cool ass play, and it was well executed. It was a great design, and it worked. Like, if I was wearing a hat, I would take it off to Greg Schiano, because that was just a good play, and it was fun. So like, yeah, it sucks that it happened against the team that I'm rooting for, but that was fun. Like, that's a good play. Let's see more of that in college football.
To me, that's a good indicator of kind of how you watch sports in general. Just like, you can just, like, sometimes you just, they got us on that one, Yeah. I mean, if they don't do that exact play, they don't get it. Ohio State got, like, Eichenberg went over the top. Ohio State had that snuffed out, and it's a super risky play. There's like 5 different scenarios. That ball is going back the other way. So, it worked perfect. If you look at that and you're like, we got to be prepared. Yeah, come on, man. I mean, no, you don't. I've never, I've never seen that. Like, if somebody does sniff it out, player of the game. But it happens. It's a great play call. It's a risky one. It's a great play call, and it worked. Sometimes you just got, like you said, good job.
Yeah. There were 2 big plays for Ohio State in terms of like yardage. There was obviously the Travion Henderson catch and run that we talked about. And then there was the pick 6, which Josh Proctor initiated, and then Jordan Hancock finished. Those 2 plays, to me, both in the second half, really kind of sealed the fate. Now, obviously, Rutgers still made it a 1 possession game after that. So I'm not saying like this ended the game, but like, those 2 plays turned the tide in terms of both momentum, but also vibes for Ohio State, because like, if Rutgers scores instead of Ohio State getting that pick 6, like, that's a much different game. And it was not over at that point. So I'm not saying like Ohio State scored that touchdown and then it was obviously over because they were at 14-9. No, but like, those types of plays are the types of things that, for whatever reason, Ohio State has been able to come up with when they've needed them the most this season. Think back to the Notre Dame game, like 3rd and 19, there was a 4th and 7. Like, those are plays that, for whatever reason, this team, and it was Kyle McCord and wide receivers in the Notre Dame game, obviously defense, and then just an outstanding individual effort by Travion Henderson in this game. And there's been others throughout the year. But that is why, and we've talked about it before, like, that is why I get 2002 vibes from this team. The construction of the teams are very different. They were a special teams, an excellent special teams. Defense was very good. The offense was a run first team. I guess technically they are here, but the quarterback situation was much different. The offensive line situation was much different. But like, just the vibes around the team, to where nothing is ever easy. And I was a senior at Ohio State during that season. So like, I not only watched every game, I was at every home game. I was at the Purdue Holy Buckeyes game. Yeah. Nothing was easy. That's the way this feels. To be honest with you, like, I haven't felt like a lot of Ohio State games have been all that entertaining to watch since like mid Urban Meyer. So all of them are a little tedious to me at this point, because everybody, not fans, but like, I mean, like, the expectations are so high that if they're not perfect, it can be frustrating. And then when they are perfect, it's such a blowout, it doesn't matter. But like, I just feel like there's something about this team that, while they might be walking on a razor's edge, they find a way to end up on the right side of that, and that very well could come back to bite them when they play a team like Michigan, or even hell, at this point, who knows who's coming out of the West if Ohio State makes it to the Big Ten championship game, and then potentially into the playoff as well. But like, there's just an aura about them that makes me feel more confident, Justin, than I probably should.
Yeah, they make winning plays. I mean, it's a cliche thing to say, but that's what they are. They're winning plays. It's I mean, you mentioned the 2002 team. Like, you look at a Jordan Hancock play like today, and that entire momentum shift of literally what could have been 14 points. What do I think of? Obviously, not the biggest. Not at this play was not on the biggest of stages as the last one was, but in 2002, the Maurice Claret strip of Sean Taylor, like things like that. Like that game, that national championship game might have been over if he doesn't do that, and he does. It's 100%. Things like that there are plays that don't even really make any sense. Like I said, Hancock, for 99% of a play like what happened with Proctor, that ball just falls to the ground because Proctor just breaks it up. But Hancock standing right there, and the minute he caught it, I was like, he's gone. There's nobody in front of him unless Wimsatt can somehow tackle him, and he like tried to make a block or something. So I'm not sure what he tried. So it was just like, it's just those plays where they don't really make any sense. Holy Buckeye didn't make a lot of sense. The fact that Ohio State kind of won that game because of a pass, which is hilarious if you think about it, looking back on it. It
was on fourth and it was on 4th and 2 or 3, and they threw it like 30, 40 yards into the end zone, which is not a Tressel Krenzel type of thing.
No, that gets people real upset. So, it's kind of why I haven't, like, people have like pressed the panic button about this team, and I'm like, they're 9-0, and they're the number one, and people are very convinced they're going to fall in the standings, and they might because Wisconsin lost, and I don't really care if they do.
And who knows if Georgia goes out and beats Missouri, who is a ranked team handily, right, like that's fine, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And I think in terms of our land grant colleagues, like I feel like you and I might be the most positive. Which is kind of weird because I do the tweeting for land grant, people think I'm like negative and pessimistic. I'm like, no, I'm going to point out things that I don't think are very good. But like, I think you and I both feel like this team is a legitimate national title contender. And like, I might even say like, I don't want to say they're the favorite, but like, I think like they're not just there because they're undefeated. Like, I think they're there because I think they're one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country.
I saw a tweet this morning, and forgive me, I forget who did it, but they tweeted, it's weird, like kind of like Ohio State fans can be a little spoiled sometimes, and we definitely are. We've seen success at a level that most haven't seen ever outside of like Bama fans, obviously. But it feels like it's a down year, but this is the number 1 team in the country. Yeah. And the first comment was, yeah, but we can all agree this isn't actually the number 1 team. Why? Why can we agree on that?
They've got the number 1 next to them.
Yeah, they've got the 1 next to them. They're 9-0. They've beaten now. Of course, the Notre Dame game took a hit today for sure. But to this point, they've beaten
Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin. But they've beaten 2 top 15 teams. Like, they are. They do have the best resume. Now, eye test is something I've never liked because to me, I can prove anything on an eye test. I get eye test is important. I get there's facts to it, but like, on the field, when it comes to just the stats of it all and who they've actually beat and what they've done, to this point, Ohio State's been the number 1 team in the country. Their defense is and I think you wrote the article, right? I'd rather have a elite defense. Yeah, I fully agree. I've seen Ohio State 3 straight years have elite offenses better than maybe some ever have been. I've seen nothing come from it except 1 playoff win. I haven't seen, in the past 3 years, I haven't seen them beat Michigan because they didn't play 3 years ago, and 2 years they lost to them. Like, I'm comfortable with this. I like the defense winning them games. I do think the offense is going to need to be a little better down the stretch to win these games, but I've seen the offense also, like the Notre Dame game is still in my head. Like Kyle McCord had to make plays to win that game, and he did. I still think the offense is going to continue to get healthier. Cade Stover will be on the field, I'm assuming next week. I think it felt like they kind of ruled him out as a little bit precautionary today. They're not really that open about that, which is fine. And then Emeka Egbuka is just going to continue to get healthier and healthier. So, I think that's a big thing. I really do. I think Egbuka is, you're talking about another possible top 15 pick in the draft. The last mock draft I saw, he was going 12th or something. Like, he's that good. I think people have kind of, I don't want to say forgotten about him, but he just gets put kind of in a different light because Marvin Harrison is so generational. You forget, like, there's an argument that Emeka Egbuka is probably the third, fourth best receiver in the country outside of Rome, Adunze, and Keon Coleman. So, like, all of these things are going to continue to get better. They can sleepwalk past Michigan State and Minnesota. It's just what it is. I hope. We'll see. I mean, they lose that game, then yeah, everything I've just said is invalidated for sure. But then the whole season comes down, and I've said this, the whole season comes down to how Kyle McCord plays at Michigan, right? If he comes out and plays his best game, great, we're perfect. If he comes out and struggles, then yeah, it's going to be a trouble. So that's just where, when it comes to like the whole argument with like, and I've never really understood I don't want them to be number one because now there's a target on their back. They're Ohio State. That target exists. Whether they're 1, 2, 3, 4, they're still a top 5 team in the country. Yeah, you want to beat the number 1 team, but you want to beat the number 2 and 3, and you want to beat everybody you play. That to me is that's always just a talking point. So I think they've done everything they've had to do to win games, which is great. I still think Penn State's a really good team, even though the Indiana game, they stumbled a little bit. I still think they're a really good team. They're up on Maryland right now. Hopefully they can win that game. So, I don't think that, because there was a kind of a narrative after the Penn State game of like, well, maybe just both these teams suck. That's a lot for me. That's a lot. So
yeah, let me ask you this question. We'll end on this one here. I had posted some things on Twitter during the game about how, like, look, everything should be on the table for trying to get the offense to its utmost potential this season. And a lot of people came back with, well, they're 9 games in or 8.5 games in. They are who they are. And I'm like,
that's not how that works.
That, like, coaches don't stop coaching. They don't stop trying to get better. Like, yes, that might mean like they're not going to go from here to here, but they could go from here to here. And sorry if you're listening on the podcast and not seeing where my hands were on that, but like, that doesn't mean they have to go from like 5 where they are now to 10 to be successful, but they could go from 5 to 7 and make changes, whether that's in scheme and personnel and whatever. So like, to me, they've got to keep grinding. They've got to keep making changes. They can't keep doing the same things over and over on offense, because we've seen that. And I don't think that is going to be successful against Michigan at all in the postseason. But if they can get a little bit better each of these next few weeks, both in terms of practice and on the field in games, like, I still think the defense is good enough to keep them in the game against Michigan. And Ohio State will probably go in to Ann Arbor as the underdog, but like, use these next few weeks to improve and see what happens.
Yeah, and I've said this a couple of times too. Maybe why I don't feel as down on this team is there's no 2019 LSU out there. There's no 2021 Georgia. There's no 2020 Bama. I don't think any of these teams are particularly amazing. I think there's a lot of great teams. There's no elite, top of the barrel, for sure, this is the best team. I'll say this as well. I'm not, I'm indifferent about Ryan Day as a play caller. I know a lot of people don't like it. I'm not huge on the head coach calling plays in general. So as a Browns fan, with Stefanski, I kind of feel the same way. I'll say this. If they're not going to appreciate him down in Boulder, I will drive myself to go get Sean Lewis. Okay. If anybody's listening, I will drive and go get Sean Lewis to get him to Columbus.
He was at Kent, right?
He was Kent's head coach, most successful ever. Kent State won a bowl game with Sean Lewis. If you know Kent State's history in football, that is a Pulitzer Prize. Like, he should have won the Heisman for that. It was their first bowl win in history. Kent is the worst FBS team historically, record-wise, in ever, and he won a bowl game with them. So, but he just got demoted this week for Pat Shurmur, who we haven't seen that. Okay, I'm a Browns fan. I've seen Pat Shurmur, but I'll drive and go get him to bring him to Columbus if you want to switch something up. So. He would be phenomenal. But there was plenty of people that thought the offense was the offense and the defense was the defense. After Michigan last year, they never compete with Georgia, and then they found a little bit different, and they put a 40 on that defense. So obviously this offense is not that with CJ Stroud, but I do think Kyle McCord is still coming into this game. There was people that didn't even want him starting. He's 5th in the country in QBR. At some point, some of these stats do matter. I know a lot of it's benefited by Harrison Jr. But he's going to have Harrison Jr. Everybody's going to have him, no matter who the Ohio State quarterback is. So, that point is kind of moot because he's going to be there. So, I don't know.
I'm not opposed to.
I think people are. I'm not even saying McCord. Someone was like, McCord is the worst quarterback since I think they said Bozeman, which maybe I don't know, but they've had a lot of. Yeah, Beckman was worse. And Beckman, they went to a national championship. So,
Yep.
I will say this, like they've had just unbelievable quarterbacks. It's not like he's that bad. It's just he's not as good as the elite that they've had with Haskins, Fields, and CJ Stroud. So I don't this grass is always greener thing. That's where I kind of lose people.
I mean, I think McCord is average at best. Like, I think he's maybe even slightly above average. I don't think he is championship level. Like, he is not a guy who is going to lead you to a championship. Obviously, with a defense as good as this team's is, maybe you don't need that out of a quarterback.
Right.
But I also think like he could potentially be a liability in games against better defenses. So like I understand the thoughts of potentially trying to see what else you've got. The problem is I just don't think they've got anything else, and we talked about that at the beginning. So it's like, I just don't know either through injury or just like who's here. We saw Devin Brown play. It wasn't good. Everybody else is like, Tristan Gebbia's like my age. He's like in his early 30s pretty much. He's not, but he's like, this is legitimately his seventh year
yeah,
as a college quarterback. And as we talked about at the beginning, Lincoln Keenholz has been in Columbus for 5 months now. So it's like, I understand the thought, the rationale of saying like, let's see what else we've got behind Kyle. And to be honest with you, I wish that they had won games by more points. We could have seen some of these other guys, but like, I just don't know that there's an answer. Like, I don't know that there's, Superman's not coming through the locker room. Lou Gehrig is not going to Wally Pipp somebody. Lou Gehrig is not on this roster when it comes to quarterbacks. So I get it. I think emotionally I get it. Logically, it's just not. It's not a thing. But I do think that they've got to figure something out with Kyle. Kyle has to get better. He cannot miss the throws that he's missing. And this is the second week in a row where he made a really bad interception. You can't do that against Michigan. So like those are things he's got to get better at. And I don't think I don't think any player ever is a finished product. Everybody gets, and maybe that's the coach in me. I coached college sports. So like, I know everybody gets better. Even your best players get better. Even your worst players get better. So I think that there is room to grow. How much is yet to be determined, but need to see something from the offense, because if they want to reach their goals against Michigan in the Big Ten championship game and in the playoff, it's going to have to be better than what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, everybody, when it comes to Columbus, whether this is right or not, the person they thought was going to be the starter this year is on the sideline in Austin, Texas. At the end of the day, they were
not even playing there because of injury.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's just the tough part. Obviously, McCord still should be good. He was a 5-star, but but
if you miss, but that's the thing. Like Gay always says, like if you're wrong, that's why he goes out and gets a quarterback every year, rather than some places where they get one every other year. If you're wrong, you want to have another guy. The problem is I'm not even saying he was wrong with Kyle, but let's just, for discussion purposes, let's just say he was wrong and Kyle's not a guy. Somebody else in that locker room needs to be able to step up and be a guy. And I don't think Devin Brown is ready to do that. Could he potentially be able to do that at some point? Yes, maybe. But I don't think it's now. I don't know what Ohio State fans want. What's that?
Is he fully healthy?
No.
There's no.
He's still got a huge brace on his ankle. Yeah. And they said he was available for today's game. I would have been shocked if in any situation they put him in. Yeah. And the thing is, Tristan Gebbia didn't warm up today. He did not go through pregame drills. So he might have stretched and done that stuff. But like when they were throwing and handing off and doing all that stuff in pregame like he normally does, he was not involved. So who knows what the hell would have happened really Lincoln Keenholz was probably the best option as a backup if they needed to go to him, which means that unless Kyle's leg was chopped off, they weren't going to. All right, Justin, that is all that we have for this Ohio State victory over Rutgers. Before we get out of here, give us a 30-second preview of the Ohio State men's basketball team's first game of the season against the Oakland Grizzlies coming up this week.
Hell yeah. I'm so excited. Look, maybe that's why I'm so optimistic about the football team, because the basketball team is back. Ohio State plays Oakland on Monday. It's on Big Ten Plus. So good luck watching it. But I mean, it's really just $9 a month, but it's on Big Ten Plus. They beat Dayton in their exhibition, in that charity exhibition. They lost their secret scrimmage, but Jameson Battle and Devin Royal did not play. Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale, the backcourt everyone wants to see is back. Zed Key and Felix Akpar. It looks like Akpar will start over Key, so Zed Key,
which is wild to me.
Yeah.
Like where we were a couple years ago with Zed Key being arguably the best player on the team, to now he's splitting time with a true sophomore and being the backup. It's wild and encouraging and exciting because I think this basketball team has a lot of really, really good pieces.
It'll be interesting because Evan Mahaffey, the transfer for Penn State, looks like is going to be starting at the 3. That gives them 4 starters as sophomores. So while it kind of feels like an older team because all the freshmen played last year, they're still starting 4 sophomores. So they're a young team. Jamison Battle from Minnesota, I think, is going to be their however he goes, as they go, as he goes. I think he's an incredible scorer. For people that don't know him, 2 years ago, he shot 7 threes a game at Minnesota and shot the ball at 45% clip. People want to hear this. That's John Diebler-esque. Like, that's incredible shooting. I did not do that last year, but so we'll see. We'll see how they are.
Yeah.
Texas A&M Friday though, so
that should be a good one. They're what are they? They're ranked. What are they at?
15th, and they are coming
15th.
to Columbus. So they're doing a ticket package. You get the A&M game and the Michigan State game, and football. So that'd be kind of cool if you're in Columbus and want to catch a Friday night hoops game, Saturday night football game.
Definitely should do that. All right, everybody. Thank you for following along. Again, Ohio State beats the Rutgers Scarlet Knights 35-16. If you are not following us already on your podcast platform of choice, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your daily dose of audio goodness. You can also follow us on social media at LandGrant33. You can follow me at BWWMatt and Justin at Justin_Golba. Thanks so much for listening. We will talk to you soon. And as always, go Bucks.